Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Truth. I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Heston, back with a brand new episode here in The Truth. Back once again with my boy AJ Ponciano. AJ, how are you doing here today?
I'm doing great now. How about yourself?
I'm doing great as well. We are recording this on a Wednesday this week, so a little bit earlier than usual, just because we both have conflicting schedules for the weekend, and I wanted to make sure that we were able to get AJ on. I believe it was last week we didn't get you on for the weekly show. So figured that we do it on Wednesday. Most of the stuff should be relevant. The only thing is if there's somebody that we have that's maybe questionable, maybe haven't been performing well, could potentially get benched, etc. It should all relatively be the same. I just wanted to throw that out there in advance. If for some reason something happens between now and Sunday and somebody goes down with an illness or an injury or whatever, just want to throw that out there. But anyways, guys, today we're going to go ahead and go talk about our week 8 starts, sits, sleepers, and busts. And this is for the Sunday and Monday games here in the NFL. We'll give you guys 3 starts, 3 sits, sleepers, and busts each, and go from there. So without further ado, AJ, go ahead and give me your 3 starts for this upcoming week.
Yeah, so my first one, I'm going to go with JSN, and the opportunity's just there for him. Obviously, we know how pass heavy this Seahawks offense is going against the Bills. But the big thing is DK Metcalf. He's going to be out this game. He has a grade 1 meniscus tear, which should only be a week, maybe 2, until he should be back on the field. But with that, JSN should get a lot of targets here. This is a game I expect him to get 10-plus targets. One thing about the Bills, they are floating right around the 10 spot for most yards given up to this point, almost 600 yards, 9 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, and this fits right into also Geno Smith's role. They don't allow a lot of passing touchdowns. Geno Smith probably will have his 1 passing touchdown, like how we're used to seeing, an interception. But again, I think they're going to be losing this game. I think there's a good chance that they're going to be throwing a lot more. If Geno Smith gets 35, 40 target or pass attempts, I would assume probably 10 to 12 of those are going to go to JSN. JSN could have a big game here, 7 to 8 catches, over 100 yards. Wouldn't really surprise me. Next up, Jaden Reed. I love Jaden Reed in this spot. Jaden Reed, they're going up against the Packers are going against the Jaguars, who are the worst, second worst defense. They're right up there with the Ravens for pass defense. Just over 2,000 yards, 16 touchdowns given up to 1 interception. One of the big things is that Jaden Reed barely got any touches. I think he had 1 catch for a negative 2 yards last week. Really screwed me over in my fantasy league. But one of the big things that Jason hasn't had many games where he's gone back-to-back weeks, especially with Jordan Love being at quarterback, where he's had bad production games. Maybe you could look at early last year before he really cemented the type of role that he has, and as being more that gadget guy, wide receiver 1 that Jordan Love uses him as. But Jaden Reed, I expect him to have a huge bounce-back game, especially against the Jaguars defense, who don't know how to tackle. I was watching both those games in England the past 2 weeks, and they just forgot how to tackle, it seemed like at times. Jaden Reed, shifty guy, gave him open on space. And again, one of the big things why they can't tackle, that's also why they give up so many yards. They give up the big plays, which Jaden Reed is able to do, but they also give up a lot of those underneath plays that turn into 20, 30-yard plays that should only be about maybe 10 yards at the most. And the last guy, Kenneth Walker. Kenneth Walker had an okay week last week, but I really need him to bounce back. We're going back to that Bills game. That Bills defense, like I said, they're right around the middle of the road for pass defense. Their rush defense isn't much better either. They're right around the middle of the road, but it's the opportunities, how pass heavy they are, how they want Kenneth Walker to be in there on those third down carries or those third down plays where there's essentially a reception there. Bills, again, they've given up 930 rush yards. One of the big things I will say is they only given up 4 rushing touchdowns up to this point. But I think this is going to be a game, a big Jason game, big Kenneth Walker game. I don't see Lockett doing a whole bunch. I don't see Fant doing a whole bunch. I see him playing from behind. I see Kenneth Walker maybe getting 5 receptions this game. Especially because Charbonnet really hasn't gained a lot of production. Especially like in the early half of games, it's been majority Kenneth Walker. I have Charbonnet in my Dynasty League, and he's giving me like maybe 2-3 carries max in the first like 2 or 3 quarters. And then he'll get some garbage time yards or receptions. But Kenneth Walker's been a focal point of this offense, and he just has the opportunities. And his Bills defense, again, they've been very mediocre on both running and passing the ball. The only thing they've been good at is not allowing too many touchdowns, but they give up a lot of yards.
If you're unhappy about Charbonnet and want to send him over to me, feel free to do so.
Hey, I need a wide
I'm
receiver.
open arms.
I need a wide receiver. It's bad for me right now.
We might have to text after the show then and work something out. But yeah, no. Anyways, so my first start's going to be Hunter Henry. Look, Hunter Henry obviously coming off a really good week. Hunter Henry's been interesting to say the least. Had a really good week too. I think a lot of people kind of jumped the gun there with 18.9 fantasy points. We're like, hey, Hunter Henry, is he back? Is he the next big thing? Kind of a sleeper guy because obviously not many people were drafting him. I don't think a lot of people were drafting him because of the talent. I think they were concerned about the Patriots offense and respectively so. But yeah, just in general, I think a lot of people were a little bit skeptical about him. Then in week 6 against Houston, had the 3 catches for 41 yards and a touchdown. Last week, 8 catches, 92 yards. But those 2 starts there for the against the Texans and against the Jaguars, Drake May's been the starting quarterback, and he's done a really good job of peppering Hunter Henry. I talk a lot about rookie quarterbacks, not only throwing the ball to running backs, but they throw a lot of balls to tight ends as well, just because it's a familiarity thing. They're usually a reliable option to catch the ball, and they're normally running flat routes or short routes that are able to easily be completed as opposed to wide receivers running flies or something like that. But anyways, I think would be a great add if you don't have him on your team. I believe he's rostered in 36% of leagues, so widely available there in 64% of leagues. Definitely a guy that you should have at least as your backup tight end, but really could consider using as a starting tight end, especially in a year of a lot of weird tight ends. They are going against the Jets, which is a divisional matchup, and I always say those divisional matchups and Thursday night matchups are where I know it's not a Thursday night matchup. I'm just saying where tight ends usually step up to the plate and have success. But Drake May, obviously not the best of wide receivers to throw to. He's targeted Hunter Henry a lot, and I think he'll continue to do so, particularly in this matchup here against the Jets. Sticking with tight ends, I'm going to go with Sam Laporta. And it would be weird to think at this point in the year that I would have to say Sam Laporta is a must start. He currently is a 21st position ranked tight end. Obviously, he's not had a good year whatsoever. It's not really his fault. I mean, defenses are kind of figuring out how to guard against him. But most importantly for the Lions, they're running the football efficiently. And when they do throw the football, they're spreading it out to guys that maybe haven't gotten receptions, guys like Reynolds, guys like um, Jamison Williams. But speaking of him, he suspended 2 games. So that kind of opens the door for some more passing volume with guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who got a touchdown last week, and also a guy like Sam Laporta, who's been kind of waiting for that big game to kind of break through. Did get that 1 touchdown, his first touchdown of the year in week 6 against Dallas. So 1 catch for 52 yards and a touchdown. Against Minnesota, just a 1 catch for 25 yards. So back-to-back weeks of 1 catch and 1 and 2 targets. But in the first couple of weeks, 3, 4, even 5 targets. I know his value where he was drafted. You'd expect more from him. I really think this is going to be a guy that's going to be a late season boomer. It's still maybe a couple weeks for him to really get going. But I think these 2 games, especially with Jamison Williams out, is really going to determine how much you can trust Sam Laporta moving forward, because Sam Laporta is a number 2 option on that Lions team, or at least was last year. But they found ways to get the offense more involved. And on top of that, they've been running the football efficiently. But I think this is a perfect opportunity against Tennessee, who has not been very good, to kind of get at least 1, maybe 2 touchdowns, 6, 7 receptions for a good chunk of change as well. And finally, I'm going to go with Justin Herbert. I think maybe you or somebody had texted me just looking at Justin Herbert's stat line, the fact that he had thrown for 349 yards last week. Actually, it was my roommate. I don't know why I was thinking it was you, AJ. But 349 yards, 0 touchdowns or 0 interceptions. So kind of insane to think about there. A guy like Justin Herbert in the position that he is. But yeah, he's kind of waited to kind of break through. But as I mentioned, the last 4 weeks he's played, he's gradually gotten better. When you start at 9 points in week 3, it's hard to get lower than that. But 9, 11, 13, about 15 last week. He's trending on the right track forward. Obviously, Gus Edwards has been on IR, which has kind of impacted their running abilities. Yes, they run with J.K. Dobbins a lot, but you got to also understand, too, there's a period of time where J.K. Dobbins is very injury prone. So when you have a reliable passing option like Justin Herbert is, it does open the offense a little bit. But the biggest thing I was concerned about with Justin Herbert was the yards, and he's been able to get the yards, especially in a run-heavy offense. So now the biggest thing that's going to come together, hopefully, is the touchdowns, which I think definitely will come during time. 39.3 roster percent. If you don't have him as your backup quarterback, if you roster a backup quarterback, I think you'd be crazy to think about that. Crazy to not have him as backup quarterback. He only has 1 interception on the year to, I believe, 6 touchdowns. So good trajectory there. And I think he's a good fit and a good matchup this week going into a New Orleans Saints team, as you know, that's obviously reeling. All right, what about sits?
I'm going to go Kyler Murray as my first hit. Not that he's having a bad season, just the Dolphins' defense has allowed the least amount of yards up to this point through the air. They've given up under 1,000 yards with 989 yards, only 3 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. I just don't expect him to have a big game here, especially with Tua potentially coming back. The Dolphins should have better time of possession. They've been losing that a lot since Tua went down with the different quarterbacks they've been using in Huntley, Skylar Thompson there. But with Tua potentially coming back this week, they should be able to have the ball just a little bit longer. Not win the time of possession, but just not lose it by like 20 minutes, like how they have been in some games. But Kyler Murray and big things with Marvin Harrison is I don't think they've been using Marvin Harrison correctly up to this point. They've been using it as more of that like true deep field, stretch the field type threat wide receiver, which he can do, but he needs to have a little more middle of the field type routes. And I still expect him to do that, especially lining up probably against Jalen Ramsey for most of the game. I just don't expect Kyler to have a big game. He does have the rushing potential, so that I wouldn't say scares me, but it will be a factor. I think he will have a little more rushing yards in this game and probably a rushing touchdown. But I don't expect him to go over like 225 yards or anything in this game. Maybe an interception as well. Next up, I'm going to go with Chris Olave. And as much as I love Chris Olave, he's coming back off of concussion that he sustained 2 weeks ago up to this point. He still has a rookie quarterback in Spencer Rattler. There is a chance that Derek Carr comes back this week, but honestly, I don't expect him to. I think that they'll stick with Rattler one more week and have Carr heal from that oblique injury. The Chargers defense has given up almost 1,100 or 1,200 yards, which is the third best in the NFL. 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. One of the things, they also have 13 sacks on the season. They create a lot of pressures. I think Olave will play a lot of one-on-one. I don't know if he'll be on like a snap count. Maybe, probably not, because it was concussion. It wasn't any type of physical injury outside of obviously what concussion is, head injury. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of limits here. I just don't trust Rattler against this defense that's creating a lot of pressures and has got very few yards to the air. Like I said, they've given up the third least amount of yards up to this point. It's less of a Olave thing. Maybe it's a little bit of a Olave thing because he really hasn't had that good of a year. He had one or two good games with Derek Carr before he went down with injury. And then outside of that, I mean, he just hasn't been productive. It's been very disappointing for fantasy owners. And then lastly, I'm going to go with Chase Brown. Chase Brown's really emerged, I feel like, as a running back one there, especially with Zach Moss being injured. But I still expect him to have a big game here against the Eagles. The Eagles have one of the best run defenses. They had the best last year. I believe they're floating right around 8 or 9 this year for the amount of yards given up. They've only given up 691 yards up to this point. One of the other big things is only three rushing touchdowns. I don't know how close this game is going to end up being. I think it will probably be like a 10-point game in whatever direction. But I think Chase Brown will probably get 15 carries, maybe 16 carries, finish with like 40 yards, but he'll have like 3 receptions for like 20 yards. And I don't think he'll get a touchdown this game. Like I said, they've been very good limiting the touchdowns to running backs up to this point. So as much as I think Chase Brown moving forward will still be the RB1 and have a productive year, just against this really good Eagles defense that finished with the best run defense last year, and is still a top 10 run defense this year.
So for me, my first hit's going to be Dontavian Wicks. I was actually really excited about Dontavian Wicks. I remember I was listening to a Dynasty podcast where they had said that Matt LaFleur had said that Dontavian Wicks' player count that he was kind of reminded of by watching him play was Devontae Adams. Well, I immediately went to go pick up Dontavian Wicks. So I was like, hey, if you're comparing him to Devontae Adams, and we saw what Devontae Adams did there in Green Bay, this is definitely a guy that you should have moving forward, not only for Dynasty leagues, but fantasy leagues in general. Has been disappointing, at least at times, to say the least. His best week was week 4 against Minnesota, where he had 24.8 points. He had a couple weeks like week 2, 11.6, last week 13.8. But there's been other weeks like week 1 and week 3 where he hasn't gotten a single point at all. And week 6, he had 1.9. Going into Jacksonville, I believe, sitting 2-6 or 2-5. Something like that, but not a good record for the Jacksonville Jaguars going into week 8. It would be 2-5 because 2-6. Maybe I'm foreshadowing that the Packers are going to win this week. But anyways, the Jaguars defense has improved slightly. They are a better pass defense than they are a run defense. And on top of that, the Jaguars kind of realize that every game for them moving forward is must win to secure a playoff spot. So they're going to have a little bit extra motivation. They're going to have a little bit more moving forward in the right way. I think Dontavian Wicks is a good option, but the times that he's gotten a good amount of points are by touchdowns, and they're not by receptions. Highest reception total was Minnesota, where he had 5 for 78 and 2 touchdowns. but the other times where he had 13 and then 11 points, only had 3 catches. So that does concern me a little bit. On top of that, I'm a really big Romeo Dobbs guy. I feel like Romeo Dobbs recently has been kind of added to the mix finally. It feels like forever. I think a lot of people were just kind of hoping that Christian Watson would be the star that he just hasn't been. So there's a lot of things looking at a guy like Dontavian Wicks that really does excite me. But in this matchup in particular, I'm definitely trying to shy away from it, especially going into Jacksonville. Secondly, I'm going to go with Daniel Jones. I think this one's obvious, especially after last week. Just a terrible game against Philadelphia. 14 for 21, 99 yards. Actually got benched for Drew Lock. It wasn't like he necessarily was doing terrible. I mean, he didn't have like interceptions, but he also didn't have any touchdowns, and he just couldn't get the offense rolling. So I definitely think we're going to sit him a little bit. I know I was high on him. It seems like I'm either really high on him or really cold on him. But after week 5, I was really high on him. I thought maybe this is a guy that could materialize into the quarterback that they were expecting him to be when they drafted him 6th overall. And I think there is still potential, but I think he kind of needs a change of scenery, kind of like how Justin Fields did, even though Justin Fields had success with Chicago. I think Daniel Jones will be able to kind of get out of a situation and kind of revamp. But on top of that, they're going to Pittsburgh, and I believe it's on Monday night. I'm pretty sure it's a primetime game at Pittsburgh, which would be tough for Daniel Jones to have the success that maybe you expect him to have, especially running it. And finally, call me crazy, but Patrick Mahomes. Look, are you going to sit Patrick Mahomes? Probably not. If there's another quarterback, maybe you consider it a shot. I had seen an article like maybe don't be surprised if Patrick Mahomes becomes droppable because look, he's a 22nd ranked position quarterback. One of the best quarterbacks of all time. We all know that. He could be classified as the GOAT to some extent, but has not been playing well whatsoever. Hasn't scored more than 16 points. That was in week 3 at Atlanta. Going into Las Vegas, it's going to be a difficult environment for him on the road. It's Patrick Mahomes. Start him, sit him. I don't really know, but I'm going to sit him this week. I just think the opportunity for maybe another star kind of rise up, or just give maybe Patrick Mahomes until he really gets back into that Patrick Mahomes. And he's never really been a fancy quarterback. He's just been a really good NFL quarterback. So we'll see. But for now, I'm definitely sitting him, especially after last week. 16 for 27, 154, 2 interceptions. It's on at least 1 interception in every game. I believe 6 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. No bueno. So sit Patrick Mahomes if you have another better option, I guess. Any sleepers?
I'm gonna go with Cade Otton. Last week had a really good week. Had season high in targets, receptions, and yards. 10 targets, 8 receptions, 100 yards, and that he's to have all the opportunity right now. I mean, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are both out. Mike Evans at least for this week. Godwin out for the entire year with that ankle injury. Super unfortunate for the Buccaneers and for those two guys who are having a really good season up to that point. But Cade Otton, I mean, he's been the tight end there. He's seen a good amount of targets since week 3, 8, 9, 4, 6, and 10. So the targets have been there. He's been getting a good amount of receptions. He just doesn't really get that many yards. But last week, racked up 100 yards on 8 receptions. I mean, he's really the only receiving target. I mean, I know McMillan's there. I think Palmer's there.
Yep.
Those are the only other weapons. I mean, Otton's really the only offensive weapon as a tight end or wide receiver that can be trusted to be throwing the ball. We haven't really seen much out of McMillan or Palmer up to that point because they've had Godwin and Evans. So I expect him to have a good amount of targets there. It's more of just the opportunity. And I think it's the same thing like Hunter Henry mentioned earlier as the start. He's still pretty low on the roster percentages for a weird tight end year. For a lot of those tight ends that haven't been performing where they've been drafted. And with that, I'm actually going to stay with the Buccaneers, and I'm going to go with Rachaad White. And I think they're going to use Rachaad White as almost like a makeshift wide receiver. I see a lot of screens, them splitting him out into a slot. I just see a lot of targets here, especially just from the backfield. Especially, he's more of that receiving back up to this point. I know Sean Tucker had a really good year, a really good game 2 games back against the Saints. Bucky Irvin seems like he's more that true lead back there for the carries. But I mean, Rachaad White still showed why he's that receiving back, why he's still on there. I think he had 6 receptions last week
Yeah.
for about 60 yards. I expect him to have maybe more receptions, honestly. Like I said, I could see him splitting him out into the slot and having Bucky Irving as that true running back just because they need options out there and pass catchers. And Rachaad White has proven that he can be one of the premier pass catchers out of the backfield. And then lastly, I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy. I know this is really weird, but Jerry Jeudy may become the wide receiver one there for the Browns. He's been on that team for a little bit. They traded Amari Cooper, 2 week ago, week and a half ago, up to this point, 2 weeks ago. Jerry Judy's really the only wide receiver that I could truly name on this roster. Also, now with Deshaun Watson being down, it's going to be Jameis Winston back there at quarterback, and we know how Jameis Winston likes to play. He likes to push the ball down the field, and you really only need Jerry Judy to have, 2, 3 catches, and he could probably get you 80 yards for the way that Jameis plays and likes driving the ball down the field. So this is more of just an opportunity thing for a lot of these guys. They're going to see a lot of opportunities. I would assume they're some of the top targets, top playmakers on the team, and because of injuries or because of play style, it's the only way they're able to go.
Anyways, for my first sleeper, I'm gonna go with Jalen McMillan. I know you had talked about this earlier with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Just really unfortunate. I mean, I have Mike Evans in like 3 leagues. I have Chris Godwin in one of those leagues with Mike Evans, and it was like add insult to injury. My team scored like 70 points. On top of that, I lost Mike Evans for I believe the next 3 games is what they said, and then Chris Godwin for the entire year. And at first, like I literally didn't see the Chris Godwin injury. I literally was like in the bathroom or something. I came back, I saw him on the ground, but it looked like it was just one of those like kind of like subtle injuries where like I mean, obviously he like was in pain, but like he was on all fours, kind of just like rolling around. I was like, oh great. And then I heard Joe Buck say that, yeah, we're not going to show the replay again. And I go, are you kidding me? I was like, it wasn't that serious. Of course, what does somebody in 2024 do? They go to Twitter and they look at the play, and that's exactly what I did. And I saw his ankle did not look very right. I go, great. This is exactly what I needed. But he is out for the year. I believe he's either getting surgery or he's going to be getting surgery on that ankle. Anyways, with Mike Evans out for 3 weeks and Chris Godwin out for the entire year, that brings up some kind of random guys to fill in the Bucks role. I think Bucky Irving and Rashad White could have some more receptions out of the backfield. Obviously, Kate Otten, but the 2 receivers, Palmer and then Jalen McMillan, who's my first sleeper. I mean, you can kind of pick your poison. You don't really know what's going to happen. You kind of have to see this week to see who Baker likes and who Baker targets. I'm picking Jalen McMillan just because I felt like he was the best option for me. I mean, obviously in some leagues, Palmer's available, McMillan's available. I looked at it and I was like, you know what? I think McMillan's got the most potential. I think it's going to kind of be like a wide receiver by committee, but this is a guy that could definitely have success. Yeah, his position ranks 111, but that's what happens when you got Godwin and Evans that take over the receptions for the wide receivers. Otten gets some and running backs get some, but he's got a limited opportunity now to kind of thrive and really make a name for himself. And I think the Bucks are really going to give him and Palmer that chance because they really want to see if they have something in a guy like him. He could maybe be the Malik Neighbors or Brian Thomas of their team of being a rookie, or not necessarily a rookie, but a young player that kind of jumps into the mix and has success from the get-go. So I'm going to start him this week, especially in Atlanta. Obviously, a lot of downward turns, I guess you could say, for this Bucks team, but this could maybe be an upturn and maybe could be a positive out of a couple negatives because this is a team that still wants to compete for the playoffs. Secondly, yes, I'm going to go with Anthony Richardson. I don't know what to make of Anthony Richardson. I'll be honest. I mean, I don't think anybody knows either. He was my third position ranked quarterback going into the draft, and I mean, it's just strictly rushing, right? I mean, he can't throw the ball. He's like Malik Willis throwing the ball. I mean, at one point he was like 5 for 19 or something throwing the football, but finished 10 for 24 for 129, 0, 14 rushes for 56 yards, 8.76 fantasy points. Just could not connect with his wide receivers, and it's really just weird to see. I mean, he's so lowly valued that it's almost one of those things. If he's on waivers, you got to pick him up. That's why I picked him up last week, and I just know what he can do because he did it in week 1 with his rushing abilities, and I'm just hoping that he can get back to that. But I definitely think you could at least pick him up and store him if he's available. He's rostered now in 71.6% of leagues. Maybe he's going to get benched for Joe Flacco again because Joe Flacco had success. I don't know. But for now, especially if Anthony Richardson is that quarterback, I'm going to probably utilize him as much as I can, just strictly off the rushing value that he's able to offer. And then hopefully he kind of figures out his throwing side. Because look, I mean, Anthony Richardson and Lamar Jackson are very similar. There was a lot of risk when the Ravens drafted Lamar Jackson. They knew that he couldn't really throw the ball. They knew that he could run it efficiently, but they didn't really know how well he could throw it. But after really his first year, he really took that offseason to figure out how to throw the football, and he's the best quarterback in the NFL, and it's not even close. So maybe similar comparisons. I mean, obviously, I think even Anthony Richardson's just better an athlete, as we can see. Obviously, he's huge, but I don't know. There's pros and cons. Maybe he's more of a dynasty safe holder as opposed to a fantasy redraft, but I definitely would keep him and really start him if you really want to try to get something new, because what's the worst he can do? He's already shown the worst he can do, but the upside is there. And then finally, I'm gonna go with Cedric Tillman. I know you mentioned Jerry Jeudy. I'm gonna go with Cedric Tillman. I love Cedric Tillman. Obviously, last week was a weird week for the Browns, losing to Deshaun Watson. Had 8 catches for 81 yards, and that's the only catches he's really had since week 4. And even then, week 1 through 3 had 1 catch for like 3, 2, and 4 yards. So not really lining up the stat sheet, but now you look at with Amari Cooper gone, you got Jerry Jeudy, who I don't really know. I feel like Jerry Jeudy had the potential to be a number one wide receiver in Denver, and he just didn't live up to the expectations or live up to the standards. And maybe that's a similar area. And on top of that, Jameis Winston's going to be starting for the Browns. So who does Jameis Winston have as a connection? Who does he find as a connection? There's a lot of different things that are just kind of unknown. So is this a deep sleeper? Absolutely. But if you're in those 14 or even 16 team leagues, this is a guy that could have tremendous success because Jameis Winston, as you know, is just used to throwing the ball like a madman. Loves throwing the deep ball, loves it. If you're a wide receiver, that has tons of value. Obviously, if you're a Jameis Winston fantasy owner, it doesn't. But we're talking strictly about the fantasy value that Cedric Tillman could have on top of the skill set that he already has and possesses. This could be a perfect opportunity, especially as a deep sleeper that nobody's really talking about right now. And really, as the season goes on, could emerge as the Browns' number one target. Okay, what about any bus?
Baker Mayfield. I know I've been talking up those offensive weapons, but at the end of the day, for Baker Mayfield, one of the things that making him super fantasy relevant is the amount of touchdowns that he's been able to throw. I believe he leads the NFL with 18 touchdowns right now. I don't. Maybe he'll have a touchdown, 2 interceptions in this game, something along those lines. Maybe 330 yards on that stat line. I mean, we've seen him turn the ball over, especially more recently this past few weeks, especially in those interdivisional games. Against the Saints, he had 3 interceptions. They're going against the Falcons, who have a pretty solid defense. I believe they're floating right around 12 or 13 right now for yards given up, just over 1,400. They have given up 10 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, so an R rate ratio. But again, interdivisional game, teams know each other up to this point pretty well, and those games, especially between the Bucks and Falcons, have been a lot more. And like I said, Mike Evans, Godwin out are both going to be out. Godwin out for the year, Evans for at least 3 weeks. And he's going to be out throwing to his running backs a lot more. And Cade Otton's probably the true number one option. Now, like we said, we like those guys because it's going to rack up probably a lot of yards, a lot of targets, a lot of receptions because they're going to be playing from behind. But with that, it kind of doesn't help. That only helps those guys. It doesn't help the quarterback out in this position. Like I said, unless if he goes for like 340, 350, or has one of those games where he hits 500 yards like Kirk Cousins. But if he doesn't have a lot of touchdowns, then and a couple of interceptions, that doesn't really provide a whole lot of value if he's throwing for under 300 yards. So I don't expect him to have a big game here, mainly with all his weapons being gone. It's just a tough one, especially coming off a short week, trying to find out which guys can play or can run which routes, have that connection built up, that trust that you have to build up for those timing routes. I just don't think it will be there, especially early on in the game. Next up, I'm going to go with Terry McLaurin, and it's been mainly because Jane Daniels. I don't know if he's going to play this week. He's considered day-to-day last time that I checked with the rib injury, but as of right now, it seems like Marcus Mariota will be filling in for Jane Daniels. Mariota did play well when he filled in last week for Jane Daniels, which I'm really excited for as an Oregon fan to go watch Marcus Mariota start a game. But one of the other things, playing the Bears have only given up 4 passing touchdowns with 7 interceptions, just over 1,200 yards. They've been one of the best pass defenses in the NFL. Jalen Johnson, I believe it is. I always forget his name. I know his last name is Johnson. Cornerback for the Bears. He's been one of the best coverage cornerbacks in the entire NFL the last 2 seasons at the very minimum, maybe the past 3 seasons. One of his big things is that he follows whoever that number one wide receiver is and shuts them down. I mean, he's kind of like pass retained. I believe they're like 1A and 1B right now for cornerbacks. So McLaurin, I just with not having Jay Daniels, having Mariota there, who hasn't had that big of a connection between them just because they've only really played this past week when Jay Daniels went down, going against one of the top pass defenses. I would just fade him here. He's someone you probably will start at the end of the day, but I wouldn't expect a big game here. And then last up, I'm going to go with Tony Pollard. One thing with Tony Pollard is that I just don't really trust him. I know he's had some solid weeks, but like I said, I just don't trust him. Uh, Going against one of the better run defenses, also one of the top run defenses in the Lions. Going against the Lions, Titans are probably going to be losing. They traded DeAndre Hopkins. They're kind of just blowing everything up. There's a chance Tony Pollard could get traded. I don't know if they will because they only signed him to a 2-year deal. That was pretty cheap, so they'll probably have him around. But I just don't expect Pollard to have a big game. Like I said, the Lions have one of the best run defenses, only giving up 555 yards up to this point, which is fourth best in total rush yards given up. 6 rushing touchdowns, which is a little bit on the higher side. I know Tony Pollard gives a little bit of upside through the air, but I'm not sure about your Hall of Famer Will Levis if he's back this week or not, or for Mason Rudolph again, starting at quarterback. But like I said, he may have the opportunities. He may see some of the receptions there, but the Lions defense, they usually give up a lot more yards to the air, and they may have to ditch that, especially because I'm expecting the Titans to be playing from behind.
I don't know either, to be honest. I don't think that
That's your Hall
pick
of
is really
Famer.
going to
That's your
fruition.
guy.
I know. Give it time, man. Give it time. Maybe second or third team. Maybe like a Baker Mayfield situation. But yeah, it's not looking too great right now. For me, my first bust is going to be Xavier Legette. I absolutely love Xavier Legette. I drafted him in my dynasty league, and I absolutely love having him because of the talent that he has. I just think the thing for him is he's going to be somebody that's going to be a top receiver in the league next year or the year after when that Panthers offense kind of has some more stability. Hasn't really clicked with Bryce Young. There's potential that they maybe move on from Bryce Young at the end of the season, even though they've said that he is their franchise guy. You never really know, especially in the NFL, where they're positioned with picks. Maybe there's somebody that's really available for them to kind of change the page, but hasn't necessarily had the impact of a rookie season that we'd expect. Although he's had some good games. Week 4, 6 for 66 and a touchdown. Week 6, 3 for 23 and a touchdown. I just think in this matchup, it's going to be a little difficult for him. On top of that, he's going into Denver, which is always hard to play. And Bryce Young is back at quarterback with Andy Dalton, I guess, getting in a car crash and spraining his thumb this week. So, again, talk about the Panthers as a whole. That just sounds like the exact thing that happens to the Carolina Panthers. Anyways, I'm really high on Xavier Legette, even towards the end of this season and really moving forward in dynasty leagues. But this week, I think with Bryce Young at quarterback, they haven't really clicked just yet, and they've only played in a couple games, so it's kind of hard to do so. I think this is a guy that really will take time to really develop and be a star, even though he's got all the tools he needs and could be kind of like a DK Metcalf, a guy that's an absolute unit and has great success. Secondly, I'm going to go with Tua. Now, Tua, I think, is going to be good to play. Not too sure yet, which is another reason why I put him at the bus. But obviously, he got a concussed in week 2 against Buffalo. Hasn't played since then. It's been hard. Been hard to not see Tua out there for my dynasty team, but it's just in general because of how bad the Dolphins' offense has been. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, completely just gone. They have not been able to have any success whatsoever. It's not their fault. Their quarterbacks just can't get them the ball. The coach is too worried about the way he looks. He can't even call right plays. Tua is the quarterback that they desperately need. I do think he'll be fine. I feel like he would kind of have a Justin Herbert type performance where he gets the wide receivers going, but maybe throws 2 or 3 interceptions that kind of depletes his fantasy line. On top of that, it's his first game back. He's 3 or 4 concussions. How cautious is he going to be? I think the rushing upside is definitely not going to be there, especially this week. He needs to get a little bit more comfortable in the pocket. On top of that, what are the hits that he's going to take? Is he going to be timid? Is he going to be rigid? Is he going to be scared? I don't know. There's a lot of things to consider. I know there's a lot of people that maybe are in need of quarterback. Yeah, Tua is a great option, but I really just think that he's kind of on the cusp of like really career-ending stuff. But he's really just kind of got to get back in the swing of things and kind of get back to the success of staying on the field like he did last season. And I think this week will be a week for it's a little bit slower for him. Wide receivers and stuff get going, which would be great. Excuse me. And then finally, I'm going to go with Keon Coleman. He hasn't had a game of more than 4 receptions. Last week was kind of an outlier. Had 4 catches for 125 yards, so 16.5 fantasy points. Just too inconsistent from top to bottom. That's been something that's been hard for me to kind of consistently feel good about Keon Coleman, especially since there was, I think, maybe the most highly anticipated rookie with Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis being gone, having the 2 tight ends to really step up to the plate. It just hasn't worked just yet. And I don't think it's necessarily his fault. I just think it's the situation that he's currently in with Josh Allen and that Bills team as a whole. So I do think as time goes on, he'll get good. But on top of that, Josh Allen's looked spotty at times throwing the football too. It seems to be at times as well. He's been really reliant on his legs, which is a huge part of Josh Allen's game. But it's at times feel like he's been a little too reliant. So I'd be really curious to see moving forward how reliant he is on his legs and the success that he'll be able to have moving forward, throwing the football, especially to a young rookie guy like Keon Coleman. On top of that, they did bring in Amari Cooper. And I know that, Amari Cooper and Keon Coleman had good weeks last week, but Keon Coleman had a big catch, right? That's the difference. If he didn't, get the big catch, he would have had 7, 8 fantasy points as opposed to 15 or 16 that he had last week. But still like him as a prospect. These rookies are either really hit or miss, and especially at the wide receiver position, but all typically have good careers moving forward. Thank you guys for listening to another episode here on The Truth. If you guys did enjoy it, make sure you follow The Truth on Twitter at The Truth as one to stay up to date with the latest information regarding The Truth, including podcast dates, podcast uploads, and other important information you don't want to miss. Make sure you guys also follow The Truth on Instagram and TikTok at the.tt.truth. I looking to find a drink that offers peak hydration, raises your energy levels, speeds up your recovery, and keeps your mind sharply focused on memory. Look no further than Acid Rainwater. I'm excited to partner with Bloodline Sports, AZ, and Acid Rainwater, which focuses on peak hydration and productivity while also maintaining ecosystem-friendly product. Use code HESSON15, that's HESSON15 for 15% off every purchase. As always, I'm your host, the one you love the most, Niall Hesson, joined once again by AJ Ponciano. Take care and good night.